At 0630 hours local time, the lead fuel tanker was halfway across the Chonhar pontoon when the crossing came apart beneath it. A Ukrainian drone had driven its warhead into the shore anchor, holding the floating bridge in place, and the blast threw that first tanker sideways into open flame. Vapor caught. The fireball climbed close to 300 feet, and the black column that followed bent over the Syvash lagoon in a smear you could see from 15 miles out. Behind that tanker sat a convoy hauling 2,400 tons of fuel toward Crimea, and 6 miles back, sunk into the earth, the crew that had just lit the fuse said nothing at all. To understand why a floating bridge was worth trapping an entire convoy over, you have to go back a few weeks. The main Chonhar bridge, the fixed span that had carried Russian supplies across the strait for years, was already gone, its deck cratered by earlier Ukrainian strikes and closed to traffic. What replaced it was this: a low pontoon crossing thrown across the same narrow water, a chain of floating sections that had become one of the last routes Russia could still use to feed occupied Crimea. And Crimea was starving for fuel. Cash sales of gasoline on the peninsula had been banned outright. Drivers were down to paper coupons capped at 20 liters a head, and even those were running short. Every tanker that reached the far bank mattered, which is why Russia kept sending them, and why Ukraine was watching this one crossing and nothing else. The problem for Russia was throughput. A pontoon crossing is slow. It can only bear so much weight at once, so trucks don't roll across in a stream. They stack up. They queue on the approach road, bunch together on the floating spans, and crawl forward bumper to bumper with nowhere to go. Ukrainian crews had noticed this weeks earlier, and they said so plainly. The low capacity forces the trucks to pile up, and a pile of stationary trucks is no longer a convoy. It is a target that has already parked itself. So Ukraine did not strike the first tanker it saw. It waited. It let the escorts roll on. It let the cargo trucks find their places. It waited until the fuel tankers were nose to tail across the middle of the crossing, until the spans sat low under all that weight, until there was no lane to turn around in and no water to scatter into. The Russian drivers believed the hard part was behind them. The bridge was down, but the pontoon was the workaround, the safe way through. They were on the crossing. They thought that meant they had made it. What none of them knew was that the crossing itself was the trap. And before a single Ukrainian drone had even left the ground, a Russian listening post beside the water had already caught its signal. The signal the Russians caught did not come from the heavy drone. It came from the small ones sent in first. 10 Ukrainian FPV drones lifted from an ambush position 6 miles northeast of the crossing and dropped low over the coast. And their job was not the bridge at all. It was the line of trenches, gun pits, and observation posts the Russians had dug along the approach to shield the pontoon. The lead FPV skimmed the waterline and put its warhead through the roof of the first firing position. A gap opened in the coastal line. 3 more followed it down. 1 into the trench, 1 into a gun pit as the barrel was still traversing. The last through the smoke and into the observation post, covering the approach road. Black smoke rolled across the shore and blinded the defenders. That was the door. And through it came the reason all of this had been arranged. It was a vampire, a heavy Ukrainian multi-rotor, an agricultural sprayer rebuilt into a bomber. Where the pesticide tank used to sit, it now carried a shaped charge slung beneath the body on a cable, heavy enough to break a bridge. Think of it as a flying tractor with the tank swapped for a wrecking ball and the wrecking ball swinging free every time the aircraft turned. It crossed the exposed shoreline inside a screen of the surviving FPVs, and it was not aimed at the trucks. It was aimed at the crossing itself. Here is the thing about a pontoon bridge, and the thing that had been frustrating Ukraine for weeks. It has no piers, no pillars driven into the seabed to shatter. It is a string of floating sections held together by joints and held in place by anchor cables to the shore. Ukraine had already learned that you cannot kill it the way you kill a real bridge. Months of HIMARS strikes had punched the fixed Chonhar bridge full of holes, each rocket a 90-kilogram warhead landing within a few feet of its mark. And that worked, because a concrete span that loses a section stays lost. A pontoon does not. Punch a hole in one floating section and the Russians simply unpin it, float in a spare, and repin the line within hours. Firing rocket after rocket into it is like tearing a single link out of a chain and expecting the chain to fall apart. It doesn't. It just gets a new link. So Ukraine stopped trying to make holes. To take a pontoon down, you don't perforate it. You unfasten it. The joints between sections and the anchor cables to the bank are what hold the whole strip together as one road. They are the zipper. Punch the fabric of a jacket and it's still a jacket. Catch one tooth of the zipper and pull, and the entire seam splits from end to end. The Vampire's operator was not looking at the tankers crawling onto the deck. He was looking at the shore anchor, the pit where steel cables tied the floating road to a concrete block on solid ground. Break the fabric and you get a wreck. Break the anchor and you get a road that swings sideways into the current with the whole convoy still riding on it. He began lining up the drop, but the moment his hands moved on the controls, 6 miles away, a very different Russian crew heard him do it. They were not watching for the drone. They were listening for the man flying it. Every correction the operator made sent a radio pulse from his control station to the aircraft, and a passive Russian direction-finding set was picking those pulses out of the air the way you'd hear one voice in a silent room. It did not jam. It did not try to seize the drone. It only listened, and it fed each bearing to a second set positioned elsewhere, and where the two bearings crossed, the operator's bunker sat inside a shrinking circle. Then the trap Ukraine had built for the convoy started closing on Ukraine. Russian forces stopped defending the bridge and started hunting the crew. 2 FPVs turned toward the bunker to flush the men out. Behind the line, a self-propelled howitzer took a Krasnopol round, a shell that steers itself onto a laser-marked point in its final seconds, and waited for a reconnaissance drone overhead to paint the target the instant anyone stepped outside. And then the jammer came on. It was a repellent, a Russian anti-drone electronic warfare system, and its job is not finesse. It doesn't locate a single drone and cut a single frequency. It floods every control, communication, and navigation channel across a wide bubble around wherever a drone is working, and it does it on every band at once. On the operator's screen, the picture broke into blocks and froze. He switched frequency, standard anti-jam drill, hop to a clean channel before the other side follows. There was no clean channel. He switched again. Nothing. The whole bubble was noise, and switching inside a wall of noise gets you nowhere. Meanwhile, the Vampire, half-controlled, began drifting off the crossing with 80 kilograms swinging under it, and if the link cut entirely, it would coast on inertia until the battery died and drop wherever it happened to be. He had one option left, and it was the wrong kind of option. He turned his transmitter power up. The stronger signal punched through the noise. The image came back, still stuttering, enough to drag the aircraft back onto its line. But raising power to beat a jammer is like lighting a flare to read your map in a storm. You get your bearings, and every sniper on the ridge now knows exactly where you're kneeling. Before, the direction finders had him inside an area a few hundred meters wide. Now they had the bunker. He had saved the drone and sold his own position to do it, and the bomb still hung unreleased beneath the aircraft. He drove the Vampire out over the anchor pit, ran the winch, and lowered the charge the last few meters until it settled against the concrete block beside the cables. Placed, but not yet detonated. Because here was the discipline the whole plan turned on. Ukraine did not want the bridge down yet. Blow the anchor now and the convoy stops short on dry land. They needed the tankers out on the floating spans first. So the bomb sat on the anchor and waited, and so did the drones, while 2 Russian FPVs closed on the men who had put it there. Then the convoy came, the BMT Terminators rolled on first, cargo trucks behind, and in the belly of the formation the long line of fuel tankers, each floating section sinking and rising under the weight. 5 FPVs were still up. 3 of them climbed, pointed their noses down, and dove at the center of the convoy like they meant to die there, and the Terminator's 30mm turrets swung up and opened fire, filling the air over the deck with tracer, every Russian gun now aimed at the sky, which was the point. Down at the waterline, 2 more FPVs ran flat across the surface toward the shore. The dive was the fist in the face. This was the knife in the ribs. One decoy came apart in a burst of cannon fire. The second bored in, dragging the turrets further off axis, and the last two reached the anchor. The lead drone dropped its reticle onto the pit where the vampire's charge lay against the concrete, and went in. The screen went white. The blast tore the anchor block apart and cut the cables. One snapped, then the next, and the near end of the pontoon lost its hold on the shore. The current took it. The first section turned broadside and pulled the sections behind it out of line, one after another, a road folding sideways with trucks still on it. A tanker slid, hit the railing, jackknifed. The second FPV threaded the gap between two trucks and put its warhead into the flank of a tanker mid-span. The shell split. Fuel misted, then lit. A fireball rolled down the deck and swallowed the vehicles trapped around it, and the last drone turned into a second tanker 40 meters on, and the pressure built for a few long seconds before that one went too. The fire did the rest of the work. Not every tanker blew at once. The first blast just raised the heat, and the heat did the arithmetic. Valves warped. Fittings tore loose. Fuel vapor pooled along the buckling deck and found the next flame, and the next. The vehicles at the front of the column could not turn back, the ones behind could not move forward, and the terminators meant to guard all of it were pinned between the trucks and the tankers while the floating road kept swinging out of line beneath them. Ukraine never had to destroy every vehicle. It only had to cut one anchor and let the current, the weight of the convoy, and the fuel finish the job. Count what that one anchor bought. A convoy caught mid-crossing. Fuel tankers burning across a bridge that no longer connected to the shore. Cargo trucks jammed nose to tail with nowhere to go. Escorts trapped in the middle of it. And the crossing itself, the low pontoon that was already the workaround for a bridge Ukraine had knocked out weeks before, folded into the Syvash and stopped being a route at all. But the tankers are not the story. The route is. This was never one convoy on one bad morning. Occupied Crimea was already rationing gasoline down to paper coupons and 20-liter caps, and every fixed crossing feeding the peninsula had been battered or closed, which is exactly why Russia was reduced to pushing fuel across a floating bridge in the first place. Ukraine did not target a column of trucks. It targeted the thinnest remaining thread in a supply line, already down to its last strands, and it picked the one moment when cutting that thread would take a convoy down with it. That is the pattern worth seeing here. The strike that matters is rarely the one aimed at the target you can see burning. It is the one aimed at the seam holding everything together, thrown at the exact second the enemy has committed too much weight to pull back. So here is the question worth arguing over. What actually killed that convoy? The decoy drones that pulled every Russian gun up into the sky, or the single warhead that found the anchor no one was guarding? Tell me which one you'd call the decisive move, and why, down in the comments. If you want more breakdowns like this one, subscribe and turn on the bell. The next operation is already on the table.